Okay, we're going to get started now. Welcome everyone to our third Hazards Webinar Wednesdays, Basics for Businesses. This webinar today will be geared towards businesses. We have a lot of great agencies on right now who are going to share some good resources, and we have a researcher on who has done some work with business disruption who's going to share some lessons learned. In April, we held part 1 and part 2 of our Insurance Basics for Texans with speakers from Texas Department of Insurance, FEMA Region 6, Texas General Land Office, the Texas Water Development Board, Office for Public Counsel, Texas Windstorm Insurance Association, and Texas State climatologists who came and talked about some locally relevant climate information. So we are recording all of these webinars. We have previous recordings, and we will be sharing these and having these up on all our social media pages, and agencies that are participating will also be sharing this. So if you are unable to attend, or if you attend and you think this would be interesting for other people, I highly encourage you to find Texas Sea Grant through Facebook or subscribe to our YouTube page to get all of the latest videos. We will also be providing contact information for each of the speakers. So if you are watching a recording of this and you hear something interesting, you will be able to reach out to them if you would like to learn more about what they spoke about. Our Hazards Webinar Wednesday series will be a fixture throughout the 2021 hurricane season. Our future webinars will cover other topics related to disaster preparedness, such as forward-looking building codes and ordinances, avoiding contractor fraud, and the recovery phase of disasters. So we will hold future webinars in late June, August, and October. So please keep up with our social media and listserv so you can find out when those are. My name is Ashley Venice. I am a coastal planning specialist with Texas Sea Grant, housed within Texas A&M University. I am part of a community resilience collaborative, which is a research and extension-based coastal planning program that combines the reach and resources of 2 Texas A&M programs, Texas Sea Grant and Texas Target Communities. So I am being joined by my other team members, Walter Peacock, who is located in Harris County and doing the background magic with the audio and video, and we'll be introducing our speakers, and Kate DeGennaro, who is located in Brownsville. She will be running the question and answer portion, and we will have all of our great speakers on as well. So this series was born from some conversations with homeowners and residents and business owners about, some confusing aspects of hazard preparedness and mitigation. So we're hoping that through this series, we can help people be in a more prepared mindset and get ready for not only the hurricane season, but floods, wind disasters, anything that we have in this wonderful state of Texas. So without further ado, I am going to pass over the video to Stephanie Yuma. She's from Del Mar College, and she would just like to talk a little bit more about their program. So Stephanie, please turn on your camera. There you are.
Thank you so much. Can everybody see my screen? All right, so I just wanted to thank you for allowing us to come in and speak today to everyone that's joined us on this webinar. I definitely am appreciative of the opportunity to address everybody, and I just quickly want to give some of a rundown about the services that we have to offer for anyone who is a client at our Del Mar College Small Business Development Center. So again, my name is Stephanie Yuma. I'm the program coordinator for the Del Mar College SBDC. Here at our center, if you're not already familiar, we offer one-on-one individualized advising that is at no cost to you. And this advising is strictly confidential between you and one of our experienced advisors. So if you're not already a client of our SBDC, I'll put in the website in the chat area. You can visit our website and sign up to be a client. Once you sign up, we can match you with an advisor and you can start those conversations. We also offer workshops and webinars, just like the one that you're registered for today. And these are all scheduled events that are geared towards supporting our small businesses. And we do offer these year round, so be sure to check our website frequently to get our most up-to-date schedule. You'll see some of the events that we have for the remainder of the week on your screen right now. And you'll also see an easy access link to sign up to request an advisor, as well as our upcoming schedule of events. We are partially funded by the SBA, the state of Texas, and Del Mar College, and we are a great resource to those that are either starting a small business, expanding on an existing business, or exiting out of one. Again, all of these resources that I've mentioned are available to you at absolutely no cost. All you need to do is sign up to be a client so we can get you started. And really, our webinars, you don't even need to sign up to be a client just yet. You can start to register for any webinar that you're interested in. So my contact information is on the screen, but I'll also make sure to put that in the chat box as well. Feel free to contact me if you have any questions on anything that I've mentioned today. So thank you again, Ashley, for you and your team having me and being able to address everyone on today's webinar. I'll go ahead and turn it right back over to you.
Thanks, Stephanie. We really appreciate you having you here. And before we get started, I just want to remind everyone, I know we've been using Zoom for a long time, but please feel free to ask questions in the Q&A chat box. You can ask during the presentations or wait until the Q&A panel that we're gonna have after all of the presentations. We're gonna have everyone turn on their videos and answer some questions from the crowd and prepared questions. So please use that feature if you have any questions. And Walter, I'm gonna pass it to you.
Thank you, Ashley. First up, we have Katie Galen, and she is the Regional Director for the Better Business Bureau. Please take it away.
Hi, I'm Katie Galen. I'm the Regional Director for Better Business Bureau in the Coastal Bend. And I just wanted to talk to you guys a little bit today about disaster preparedness for business owners. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen now. There we go. Okay, so what is BBB? So here at the Better Business Bureau, we help people find and recommend businesses, brands, and charities that they can trust. Our vision is an ethical marketplace where buyers and sellers can trust each other. So BBB has been around for over 100 years. If you are a business owner, you are most likely very familiar with BBB and just the trust that comes with our brand and with our name and with accredited businesses who are able to have that connection with us. So also, I think something that a lot of people are not aware of is that BBB is a nonprofit organization. So there are a variety of services that we offer to the public, and it's all free of charge. And so we do also offer free comprehensive business advice to both accredited and non-accredited businesses. So, you know, although we do have many accredited businesses that we're very grateful for, you know, we do also support our community as a whole and you know, do offer a lot of services. So I encourage you to visit our website, bbb.org, if you have any questions of what any of that may be. So first, we're going to talk about your response and your recovery. So as a business owner, as somebody who is, you know, running a business, who has employees that you're responsible for, you know, responsible for getting them their paycheck and things like that, you know, us here in the Coastal Bend with hurricane season, we've all been through this. You know, if you're born and raised here like I am, you know, 40 years or so, you know, we've seen this, you know, year after year. And so what's really important for everybody is to just be prepared. You know, so our response and our recovery time, our response and how we prepare for this really is, is really what will help us get through, you know, any kind of natural disaster, like, you know, as with our freeze, but especially during hurricane season, because this, you know, as we all know, is something that we tend to see in some form or another, whether it's a tropical storm or a hurricane at whatever level that may be, you know, we see this every year. So, and I think a lot of times, sometimes we feel like, oh, we've been through this drill so many times because we are here in the Coastal Bend and we do see this kind of weather often that we kind of, maybe forget about some of the small things that might make things a little easier for us down the road should we be hit with any kind of storm or natural disaster. So first things first, if you're a business owner, is communication. So, and this really, what I'm talking about here, when I'm saying communication, is consider the different ways that you are going to communicate to your customers and your employees how whatever the situation is going to affect your operations. So if we're talking about your customers, and, you know, you need to communicate with them or convey to them what's going to be going on with your business after this storm or, you know, in the immediate aftermath of the storm, whether that, you know, due to power outages or whatever it is. Think about how you're going to communicate with them because, you know, some people may have essential services So it's really important that you're able to get this information to them. And so, social media, easiest, quickest, first thing that's going to come to mind. So that's, your Facebook usually is going to be your biggest one. Of course, Instagram, Twitter, all of these social media platforms are going to be really great because most of us are going to have our phones with us if we don't have anything else. And so, you can communicate that way. Also, consider all the different scenarios. And if you're going to have the capacity to operate at full, part, or not at all. So when I say consider all the different scenarios, so consider if there are mass power outages, consider if there is flood damage in the property that you're operating out of. Consider if you have staff that can't get into work. So you need to think about all these different scenarios and how that's going to affect your business and really start to plan that out in your mind. So also is to protect the sensitive information. Now, again, this seems, of course, we're going to protect the sensitive information, but, when these storms hit, of course, we all businesses protect, everybody's information when we're on a regular day, but we want to make sure that we're keeping that same level of protection when a storm or a disaster hits. So protecting your consumer and financial information at all costs. So, you want to make sure that you're keeping some kind of offsite backup for your digital files. Now, most people are going to be saving things to the cloud, right? That's what most of us do now, but some people still want to have an actual hard drive somewhere. So, you might have a hard drive in your place of business. And if that's the way that you choose to back up your files, make sure that you have a separate hard drive that's backing that up at another place. Maybe that could be your home. Maybe you have it in a lockbox at a bank. And that's, a great place to store your hard copy files as well, if you're able to do something like that. So just make sure that you have a plan for your backup digital files, and also any of your hard copies that you have, because, a lot of people still have hard copies of different files and things like that. Not everybody is completely digital, and that's okay, but you do need to make sure that you have a plan for those hard copy files as well. So whether that's some sort of locked cabinet or a safe that's waterproof, things like that, because if we have disasters that are strong enough and that are damaging enough to our businesses and our property, you may have times where you can't get to your property, but maybe people might break in, or with flood or wind, stuff might kind of get swept away or blown away. So you want to make sure that all that information is really safe and secure, because as we know, we've seen in the news a lot of times that when these security breaches happen, whether they're intentional or not, it has a lot of really bad ramifications for the people that are responsible. So just want to make sure that we're being careful with everybody's financial information and other sensitive information, whether that's the consumers, your business financial information, your personal financial information. Just want to make sure that that is all protected. And also protect your property. So, I know a lot of, you business owners are not gonna, most people don't operate out of a building that they own, right? A lot of people have landlords. So you want to talk to your landlord, make sure that they have a plan that's in place for the protection of that property, because at the end of the day, your business is there. You need to make sure that whatever their plan is, that you're aware of that plan. So make sure that they have protection for your business. And I'm talking, of course, in the physical sense. So maybe you have a lot of windows, or any kind of windows that you have, or, a glass door or something like that. Make sure that there are some pre-cut boards for those windows. Ask the questions. It doesn't hurt to, because it's going to help them in the long run too. So make sure that they have some pre-cut boards that are going to be ready for that property. Also, who's going to install it? Because when the time comes and the warnings and everything, hurricane warnings and watches and everything's here, a lot of people are kind of running around and trying to get other things taken care of. So you need to talk to your landlord and find out who's going to be responsible for this task. Is it going to be them? Or are they asking you to do it? If they're asking you to do it, how are you going to take care of that? So that's what I'm kind of talking about when I say there are these little things that we don't typically, you kind of think, of course I'm going to board up my business. But when you're in that moment and you're trying to take care of your, all of your employees and all of the stuff that's inside that location, you don't necessarily think, well, am I going to board it up, or is my landlord going to board it up? So these are really good questions to ask and just be prepared for. Also, make sure that you're keeping your backups safe. So we kind of talked about this in the previous slide. So whether that is your, an extra hard drive, if you can upload things to the cloud. That's, typically the best thing that we can do for your digital files. Also, so wherever that second hard drive is, like I said, some people might choose to put that in a lockbox at a bank. Maybe you want to put that in your home or maybe you have another property out of town somewhere and you want to put that hard drive there. So, it goes the same for your hard copies, your paper documents, things like that. Make sure that whatever backups you have, that they are in a safe location. And so, again, things to think through on the front end to save us some time and heartache later. And also know what your plan is, and make sure that your employees know what that plan is too. And so something that we would recommend that you business owners do, if you have employees especially, is to think about these different scenarios. Think about this plan that you may have, whether you have 2, 3, or 4 different plans, whatever it is. Have a meeting with your staff. Where, as you all know, we're a few days just from hurricane season beginning. So maybe have a sit-down meeting with your staff and say, okay, guys, if this situation occurs, this is what we're going to do. If you can put something on paper and hand it out to everybody, that would be great. Put, emergency phone numbers on there if they need to get in contact with you. If you need to get in contact with them, maybe they need to know, okay, what's the plan? Or do we need to report to work? How are we going to take care of the situation? So whatever it is that you decide to do, make sure that your employees know that plan as well. Take inventory. So, this is something that we do a lot of times with our homes, but maybe don't always think about it for our business. So go through your business, take a video, take photos on your phone, whatever that is, of your property, the inside and the outside, and just make sure that you are prepared. Should you need to make any kind of insurance claims, you want to make sure that you're documenting everything. Also keep the receipts of your larger purchases. And nowadays, if you don't have the actual receipts, you can typically, get in contact with your credit card company or the store where you made the purchase. And a lot of times they will have digital copies of that on hand. If maybe you call Best Buy or whatever it is, and they have, give them your credit card number and they can bring up your purchase information. So, or let them know what credit card you used, and they can usually bring it up that way. So, a good idea is to kind of start gathering that information, just so you're not scrambling at the end, trying to contact all these different stores or different credit card companies trying to get that. So if you haven't made any recent big purchases, you might want to start doing that now. So your insurance, oops, let me move the little window here. Let's see, sorry about that. Well, that'll work. So speak to your agent, make sure that your policies are up to date. So us here in the Coastal Bend, we are most likely very familiar, you should be very familiar with windstorm insurance and how that all works. So as we know, if there is a named storm in the Gulf, we cannot make modifications to our windstorm insurance. Also, once you do make some modifications, it typically will take about 30 days for that to take effect, so that your coverage can take effect. So now is a really good time, if you haven't done it yet, to go, talk to your agent, go over your policy, what it covers, all that kind of good stuff. Make any changes if you need to now while you can. Also know your policy numbers and the contact information for your agent. So, and keep that with you at all times should we run into a disaster. So whether you want to write that on a piece of paper and put it in your wallet, or, like me, you want to put it in the notes on your cell phone. I do that with a lot of my stuff. And that way it's also backed up to the cloud too. So that's another great way to keep that information, but you want to make sure that you have it handy just in case something happens. You don't want to be scrambling. We're going to be stressed out enough. So have as much information prepared ahead of time as you can. And also note the deadlines for filing claims with your insurance. So just know what that is, so you're not surprised or rushing to do anything at the last minute. So, a resource that you, I'm sure, are very familiar with, the Small Business Administration, and, keep the local contact information with you. Know who that is, know where to go, know who to call. Some of you may already work with this organization here in town. So just, and if you haven't, I encourage you to get that contact information and just keep it handy. And as soon as you're safe and your employees are safe, contact them, and that way they can give you information as far as different kinds of emergency funding that's going to be coming through for businesses, and they'll have all of that information and you can start on that, kind of start on those application processes really quickly. So you definitely want to familiarize yourself with those application processes, and you can go, to SBA.gov now and start kind of looking at all that and see what that would entail. That way, if they're going to be asking, if you know that they're going to ask for specific documents, you can kind of start gathering things now, maybe tax information, things like that. Because once, and we saw this with COVID, once a disaster occurs or there has been a disaster declared, there's an influx of people or an influx of businesses who are scrambling to get this money. And so the quicker you can get in there and get your stuff processed, hopefully the quicker you'll receive your funding and kind of be on your way to getting your business back on track. So familiarize yourself with them if you have not already. It's really important, and with their processes so you can be prepared for that. And of course, connect with us with BBB. So anytime that there are any kind of natural disasters or even the storms that we had, a couple of weeks ago, we had those thunderstorms for a couple of days. And I'm sorry, I said a couple of weeks ago, that was last week. And they had, it was a disaster declaration in Clayburgh County and things like that, even though, it was pretty bad here in Corpus Christi, but a little worse that way. But anytime we have anything like that with the freeze, things like that, we do update our social media. We give people updates on what's going on, just so that hey, this is what the weather is saying. This is what we should expect. We'll give those types of updates, and then we're also going to give updates as far as, okay, now we're this a couple days past. We know that SBA is offering this funding. We know that you can get a grant over here. You can get a loan over here. So we'll start gathering all this information and we'll shoot that out really, really quickly. And that will update, continuously our social media. So if you've not connected with us on Facebook, I encourage you to do that. Also, our website will be updated with information as well, and that's bbb.org. And so it is a localized page, so you can go through and see if anything's going on here in our area. We'll have updates there. And you can also reach out to me at any time. Again, my name is Katie Galen, and I am the regional director for BBB in the Coastal Bend. And so I've got my email address listed there. It's kgalan@corpuschristi.bbb.org. And I also have my my business cell phone number there. So you guys can reach out to me with anything that you may need, whether it is to help you with something like this or anything else. Like I mentioned at the beginning of this presentation, as a nonprofit organization, one of the many services that we provide to the public is free business consultation. So if you need help with anything, I'm happy to visit with you. And maybe, if I can't help you, I can put you in contact with resources that would be most beneficial to you. And let me stop sharing really quickly, I think. There we go. There we go. So that is all I have. And if you guys have, like I said, if you have any questions or anything that you would like me to assist you with, I'm more than happy to do that. And so just stay safe, and, hopefully we're all prepared for hurricane season and any other, hopefully, natural disasters that don't occur. So I hope everybody has a fantastic rest of the day.
Thank you, Katie. Next up, we have John Mooney. He's the manager in property and casualty line office at the Texas Department of Insurance.
Hello, my name is John Mooney, manager in the property casualty lines office at the Texas Department of Insurance. Today I'll be talking to you about business owners during a disaster and what types of insurance that would protect a business during a disaster. So the first thing you need to do is analyze your risk. Some of those risks can involve automobiles. If you have a business that uses automobiles, whether it's to deliver goods, pick up products, transport goods, you need to analyze that and decide what type of insurance you need in case a disaster hits and damages or destroys your automobile. Do you own the building? If you own the building, there's greater risk involved with that if the building is destroyed or you're unable to access it during a natural disaster. So we'll talk about that today. Office equipment. A lot of times when you have a commercial business, and you're in the building, you have different types of equipment, whether it's a copy machine or computers, or if you manufacture goods, that's a separate exposure that you could have where it's destroyed during a disaster. What if your building is closed for an extended period of time? You have to worry about that. You may not be able to access your business, and then if you're unable to access the property, then that cuts off the lifeline of your income and your ability to pay your employees. So we'll talk about that as well. We're going to talk about the different types of insurance that you need. There's commercial property policies. There's also automobile insurance on the commercial side. Inland marine. We'll talk about the inland marine policies that are available to business owners and what types of items they cover that might not be covered under commercial property or commercial auto policy. And I'll say it once, so you may lose track of how many times I say you need to read your policy. And because there's stipulations that are in there, whether it's terms and conditions you have to meet. It's understood that you pay your premium for your policy to be active when the disaster hits. But there's also exclusions, certain items that are covered under different types of policies. And so when you lump all this in together, when you analyze your risk, there's a couple of different approaches that you can take. One of those is you can do analyzing yourself, whether you take a sheet of paper or a spreadsheet and write out all the things that you own or you need that you can't do without. And then you contact an insurance company. Another good route to do is an independent agent. You can contact an independent agent, sit down with you, and that agent's allowed to go to different companies and see what is the best product that fits your needs. And then some consult with risk managers. You as a business owner may employ a risk manager, and that's their sole job, is to mitigate or try to decrease loss occurring. But you can also take steps along the way. And a risk manager, he or she can be very helpful in analyzing your situation to determine what types of products that you need. So the first one we will talk about today is commercial property. Policies, they typically cover the buildings, the improvements, betterments you make to buildings that you don't own. So that we mentioned that at the beginning, commercial property policies, whether you own it or not. Some leases require that you carry the insurance on the building. Some don't. So you need to talk to your landlord if you don't own the building to make sure that the landlord has insurance, because if the building is destroyed during a disaster, are you going to be able to get back in there? I know that has happened to some business owners where the landlord didn't have a commercial property policy and the building was destroyed and the tenant was left scrambling to find a place to run their business. So you need to make sure from that perspective. A lot of times on the commercial property policies, covering the structures, you're going to have business personal property, office furniture, and other contents. Things that we talked about most common would probably be the computer, desk, and chairs. So if you own these items, you need to read your policy, make sure that that's itemized out. You may get paid on the actual cash value of the property, the office chair, the computer, the desk, not necessarily the replacement cost to get you a new computer. So you have to read the policy and understand that. Business income. This was a hot topic in the last year or so with COVID, because there wasn't direct physical loss to the property. And so a lot of claims were denied, unfortunately, on business income when the business was closed, because the terms and conditions of the policy spelled out what's covered. But if a hurricane or a tornado strikes your business and you're shut down for an extended period of time while you rebuild, you need to make sure you have business income, and that's typically covered under commercial property policy. Business inventory or stock. You may have items on your property before it's transported out, which is when it's in transport. It's typically covered under inland marine policies. But you may have some inventory in your business that would be covered under commercial property policy. Equipment breakdown, which covers mechanical, electrical breakdown on many different kinds of business equipment. That's covered. Fences, outdoor signs. If you're customer facing and you have customers come in your business and you got a sign advertising and saying what your business is, that more than likely is covered under commercial property. Computer hardware and software, that could be covered. Some things that aren't covered, the first one that comes to mind is money. Whether it's cash or you have business transactions and that is destroyed, that's typically covered under a crime policy. So you'll have to, if you had money or item, if you had it stored on your property and a disaster hits, it probably is not going to be covered under commercial property policy. So you need to look into for a crime policy for that. And a couple other items listed here show some other items that aren't covered. Another hot topic these days is building costs. And one thing to look at, again, read your policy, is the actual cash value of your property and then the replacement cost. So you need, typically the way the policies are going to work is they're going to pay you actual cash value minus your deductible. Typically most deductibles are 1%, but it just depends. And then once you incur the cost to replace that property, then the company will pay the difference over subject to your deductible. So one thing to remember is cost to rebuild things is skyrocketing these days. Various parts of the state, there is a boom on building. There's also a shortage on different types of lumber and products since the pandemic hit. So the cost to build is going up. So you may be underinsured. So you need to look at what do you think, and you can contact a contractor or a building company to determine what's it cost. And typically you do that off of square footage. If it's $200 a square foot to rebuild, then you have to look at, do I have enough limits to rebuild my entire property? You may not have enough on the replacement cost side. So that's one thing to consider from that perspective. Flood insurance. Most commercial property policies do not cover damage from flooding. To be protected from flooding, you'll need to buy a separate flood policy, and that's through the NFIP, National Flood Insurance Program. You can talk to your agent, or you can visit floodsmart.gov and walk through a flood policy. So most commercial policies will not cover you from a disaster or from flooding. It'll be spelled out in the policy. They may, but you just need to talk to your agent or talk to your company and see if they'll cover from floods. Windstorm and hail coverage on the coast. So if you're down on the Texas coast, TWIA, Texas Windstorm Insurance Agency, that's spelled out, sells wind and hail coverage for coastal residences and businesses. You can contact TWIA. Their phone number is on the screen here. You can also visit their website, twiA.org. One thing to remember is hurricane season is approaching. I think officially it starts June 1st, but don't wait till the last minute because TWIA won't sell your policy if there's a hurricane in the Gulf. And I'm not sure the exact specifics, whether if it's a main tropical storm or at some point they cut off selling. So if you're unsure and don't wait till the last minute with the TWIA coverage, because they'll stop writing for a time while those storms are in the Gulf of Mexico. So that's one thing to consider if you're down in the coastal areas. As I mentioned, one thing to remember is on automobiles, the state requirement only requires in the state of Texas, you carry liability insurance on your automobiles. So you can satisfy the requirement in the law by carrying liability insurance. But the main thing to remember is that will not protect you in a disaster. Any type of flooding on your vehicle, hail damage, a tornado destroys your vehicle, that typically is covered under comprehensive. So you will, if you're relying on your vehicles, you need to make sure that you have got comprehensive coverage. Unrelated to disasters, normal driving and things like that, that's covered under collision. So typically comprehensive and collision are sold together. but you need to make sure you have that because liability coverage will not cover you during a disaster. You can also buy just some other things to do is medical payments coverage. We'll pay some medical bills through auto-related accidents, and uninsured and underinsured motorist coverage is also available. And then commonly, as I mentioned, comprehensive and collision, sometimes or most times it's lumped together. It's called physical damage coverage. So you can talk to the agent or the company and say, I want to buy physical damage coverage, which typically includes both. Kind of touched on this already. Collision will pay for the damage if you're involved in an accident or if you collide with something. If it's a single car accident, or if you drive off the road into a tree, or if you're rear-ended and you don't want to wait on the other insurance companies to determine liability, you can go through your own insurance, or if your driver employee is at fault, you can handle it through your own collision. And comprehensive, we touched on that already, covers you when there's a weather event like a hailstorm, flood, tornado, hurricane, if your car's destroyed. Uninsured and underinsured motorist coverage. There's two components to that: bodily injury and property damage. And the terms and conditions of the policy have to be met. If the individual at fault doesn't have insurance, then that would be an uninsured motorist claim. Under is when there's not enough insurance to compensate you for your damages to your vehicle or injuries. So that's another component of the auto. But the main takeaway on this is for disasters, make sure you have comprehensive coverage. We mentioned at the beginning inland marine. You may not be familiar with this, but this is a type of policy that is very prevalent and common in the commercial, if you own a business. As I mentioned at the beginning, there may be times when your personal property is covered in your business, but other exposures may not. Common scenario could be a dry cleaner. You have a lot of exposure because you have others' property that you don't own on your premise. And if a tornado destroys that dry cleaner, the commercial property policy to the building may have a limit on how much they'll cover. So you may have to get an inland marine policy for the property that's in there, those clothes and other items that are dry cleaning. But inland marine also covers contractors' equipment, like backhoes and other equipment, tools, if you got specialized tools, fine art that's used to decorate an office, jewelry. So you need to, as we went back to the beginning, talking about analyzing your risk. The things that you can or cannot do, and just list out all the things that you own or you have in your possession and make sure you have the proper coverage. Here's some more examples of it's covered under an inland marine, cargo and property that's in transit. We talked about that. If you're a company and say you make and sell t-shirts and you're shipping the t-shirts across the country, then there may be, that's going to be covered under inland marine if it's damage in transit. Builder's risk policies, one thing to remember there, if you're building the property, but it's not yet finished, there's some exposure and risk involved while the building's being in the course of construction. So the commercial property policy may not start till the building is finished and opened. So you need to make sure you have proper coverage while the building is being constructed and analyzing what kind of coverage you need from that perspective. Couple little ways to save money on your insurance is remove potential hazards. Just as we talked about, a lot of companies have risk managers. You may or may not have that luxury, but you can just walk through your premises and just see if you've got that picnic table outside where your employees take a break and it's nice weather. Might want to pick up that picnic table if the hurricane's approaching. And there's different steps that you can take if you know if a hailstorm's coming. If you're able to put your vehicles inside in a garage or in safekeeping, that could help as well. Combined coverages into one policy. You may hear the term BOP, Business Owners Policy, BOP. That's a common term vernacular in the insurance industry. Companies will sell you all the coverages lumped into one. You could have the commercial property, the inland marine, the liability coverage. We haven't talked about that because that doesn't relate to disaster. But talk to your company and see if they'll sell you a business owner policy that'll cover you for everything, all your exposures that you have, and they can give you a discount potentially if you buy multiple policies, put it into one, and then the business is all covered under the one. Choose your deductibles wisely. Sometimes if you take a higher deductible, you just have to crunch the math on how often you have a loss. If you're in a high area that has a lot of hail or a lot of damage, you may not want to go with a higher deductible, say like $1,000 in your cars, because then you're using it quite often. Whereas if you're not, you may want to go to a higher deductible to save money, but then you just have to do the math on how often you would, if that savings is worth it, change your deductible from $250 to say to $1,000. So that's one thing to consider. All of these different types of policies. Same with the percentage deductible on the property. 1% to 2% may seem like a small amount, but if you have a $400,000 property, $4,000 is 1%. If you raise that deductible to $2,000, that's $4,000 difference. Then that say you have to do the math and compute that $4,000 that you're going to that you'll have to pay on a covered loss. Did you save that $4,000 in premium over the course of the time, and how often does it happen? Here's some resources. Our website is tdi.texas.gov, and you can navigate it on there. We have a business page that has some great resources. If you're shopping for insurance, we have some more information about different exposures that you may have and risk. We have a consumer protection department that can answer questions, whether it's about what type of insurance to buy, or if you need to file a complaint about your insurance company. The insurance companies do have laws that they have to follow. They're regulated by the Texas Department of Insurance. So if you think you're not being treated fairly by your insurance company, you can contact our consumer protection department and talk to them about that. And lastly, my email and phone number are on there. If you want to talk more into detail about some things, I can help you. I can also point you in the right direction and assist you from there. So that concludes my presentation.
Thank you, John. Next up, we have Randy Vivian, who will be doing your presentation.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak to everybody today. I'm just excited to be asked to be here. Always an interesting time during hurricane season on the coast. We see more things happening than I think we really care to, but it's time to make sure that your businesses are prepared and moving forward, that you're going to be able to recover from a disaster if one happens. Walter, if you'll move to the next slide. I want everybody to know that we rely on the private sector to be able to do their part when it comes to a disaster here in the state of Texas. We are going to come in, but it's going to take us a little while to get in as the Texas Division of Emergency Management. We're going to preset assets. We're going to get things ready, but for us to move in, it's going to take a little time. So it's really important that the private sector and the business community has a plan for their business and how they're going to deal with a major disaster. When I give this talk, I normally ask the room, how many of your businesses have a disaster plan already in place and set ready to go? And I find that most of the time it's about 20% of the folks that are in a talk that I'm giving actually have a written disaster plan. And I would just tell you that it's extremely important. You have a business plan, you have a strategic plan for your business. You need to have a disaster plan, and you need to be looking at what is going to happen to my business if disaster happens. For us, I grew up in Victoria, Texas, so I know about living along the coast and hurricanes and everything else that happens there along the coast. So I know how important it is to be prepared. It was interesting during the ice storm up here, because of my background living on the coast. I had 2 cases of water. I had canned goods, and a lot of my neighbors didn't. And I ended up helping some of my neighbors through that time when our power was out and our water was out. So knowing what you're going to do when a disaster happens is something that's very important. And businesses have an equal responsibility when it comes to working through a disaster. Prevention. Is your business ready? What steps can you take now that can be able to mitigate the effect to your business later? Protection. We were talking, Ms. Mooney just finished talking about insurance, and insurance is very important, but are your other assets taken care of too? And when you're talking about insurance, it's really important to know that insurers usually stop selling additional coverage, windstorm coverage, hurricane coverage, flood coverage, about 48 hours prior to a storm getting to tropical storm force winds. So once a hurricane warning is issued for a storm that's in the Gulf, insurance stops selling. So that is good information to know. But now is the time to begin looking at how to protect your business. What is your response going to be once a disaster happens? How are you communicating with your employees? Do you have a communications plan? Do you have an evacuation plan? And then recovery. How is your recovery going to happen? If your building is completely destroyed, where are you going to do business? How are you going to set that up? What contingency plans do you have ready to move forward? And then mitigation after disaster happens, and you find the flaws in your plan, and you find the flaws in your building that you need to take care of. How are you going to go through and mitigate those damages and take care of it for the future? If you'll go to the next slide. So our private sector partners, you guys have the financial capacity and the resources at the onset of a disaster to start helping survivors immediately. Like I said a while ago, it's going to take us a little while to come in to be able to begin the recovery process. And when it comes to a disaster, a major disaster like a Hurricane Harvey or the winter event that happened not too long ago, there are some certain criteria that have to be met before we can start turning on the federal money. So FEMA has a threshold, a monetary threshold that has to be met prior to what we call the spigot being turned on, and we're able to get those financial and other resources from FEMA to be able to come in and work a disaster. And that threshold is a little over $38 million in underinsured or non-insured damage. So when Hurricane Harvey came in, we knew before that there was going to be that level of destruction. And so leadership petitioned FEMA for a major disaster declaration. It was immediately taken to the president. President signed the order. So we knew beforehand, before Harvey hit land, that it was going to be a major disaster and that we were going to have federal resources to be able to go through. But a good example of when a huge incident happens, but that signature in that major disaster is not declared, would be in February of 2020 when tornadoes went through downtown Dallas, and it came up to be about $1 billion worth of damage that was done, but it went through the business district in Dallas. So most of that damage was done to buildings that were insured. So we didn't meet the $38 million threshold of underinsured or non-insured assets. So a major disaster did not get declared in that situation. So that is the key, and that is the magic number. It goes up by population every year in GDP. So that formula will be different when we come into the new fiscal year starting September 1. Probably go up to around $40 million. It'll have to be met before we can move forward there. So, like I said, private sector partners have a huge responsibility and the capacity to be able to come in and begin doing recovery operations prior to us being able to come in, and then the federal spigot being turned on. So when a disaster happens and businesses come in and begin to recover, begin to open up, that has a really good psychological effect for the community. It shows the community that things are going to get better and there's a light at the end of the tunnel. It brings expectations back up, but it also puts people back to work. So they're not completely overwhelmed by the disaster that is going on. And so the opportunity when businesses begin to open again, that's a huge, huge boost for a community. They can see the light at the end of the tunnel, but also employees working, employees are getting paid, money is beginning to move around the community again, people are working, and that is a huge stabilizing factor for the economy after a disaster happens. And probably the most important fact, and I've seen this on many levels in the many disasters that I've been associated with, is 25% of businesses don't survive a disaster. They're undercapitalized, building was destroyed, economy cratered, whatever it is, we're seeing that. When I was in Victoria, before I came to Tatum, I ran the Chamber of Commerce there during Hurricane Harvey, and we definitely saw this in the local economy. We had 5 restaurants that did not come back after the hurricane. We had other businesses that just completely closed down. It was hard, but if you're prepared, if you've got an emergency plan, that moves us in a direction that hopefully we'll be able to not be in that 25% portion of businesses not open. If you'll move to the next slide. I want to make sure that as we go through that you have resources for your business. So I wanted to give y'all some websites and some resources that you can go to and utilize right now that'll be able to help you prepare an emergency plan and start to begin to consider things necessary for your business to remain open after and recover after a major disaster. Ready.gov is probably the primary source that I would tell you to use. They have plans for everything. Questions that you need to consider, questions you need to ask yourself and your business in going through and creating an emergency plan. It'll walk you through step by step. It's an outstanding resource and I highly recommend it. Disastersafety.org is another one. Great resource to be able to look at disasters and begin to think about what you're going to need to do to your business to be able to survive those. OSHA has great publications. These are some. They look at disaster and how to recover. What your business needs to look at in equipment wise and in different things like that to be able to survive a huge event. Houston SCORE is a great organization out of Houston. They have a recovery plan that is really good and we highly recommend it. And it really was built during the pandemic. They did some stuff during Harvey, but really became robust after the pandemic, and I highly recommend them as a resource. CDC, obviously, through the pandemic, we are all listening and following the guidance of the CDC. So I would just tell you that's another great tool. us-cert.cisa, that is cybersecurity. And as we have seen just in the last couple of weeks, last couple of months with the Colonial Pipeline ransomware incident, shutting down a computer system for a agency, a business, a conglomerate has a huge effect on society. I mean, we saw gas outages all and up and down the eastern seaboard. Last week, I was in Florida and drove by gas stations that did not have gas. And so it has huge ramifications for a business. And ransomware is a big deal. We've seen county governments in the state of Texas, their computer systems frozen up, and these hackers demanding money to be able to reopen them again. So it's something to look at, something to really very much to consider is how secure are your servers? How secure is your system in your business? DSHS is Department of State Health Services. They have some great preparedness information for you. FEMA continuity guidelines on how to work on after an event. We had the SBDC talk a little while ago. I actually served as the chair for the Southwest Texas SBDC Advisory Board, and it is an outstanding group, a great organization, and they have outstanding resources, wonderful people that work with you to be able to help you with your business, even before an incident, but even starting up a business. They're an amazing group. I'm proud to be associated with them. And then don't forget your local Office of Emergency Management. I mean, we as taxpayers are paying their salary, and this is what they do. They sit around in rooms all day trying to figure out how to recover and how to help businesses with disasters and how to help communities with disasters. So pick up the phone and call them. I know many EMs across the state that'd be more than happy to jump in and help businesses in their local jurisdiction and begin to help you put a plan together. So each community has an emergency manager. Utilize them. They're a great resource for you. If you'll move to the next slide. So we need you to do some things and we need you not to do some things. We need you to think about building relationships prior to a disaster. If your business is in a strip center, know the other business owners in that strip center, work a plan together, because if it's going to affect your business, it's going to affect everybody else in there. Corpus Christi has some high-rise buildings downtown. How are you going to evacuate a building in a case of an emergency? What is the plan? How are your suite mates going to be able to work with you to be able to take care of a disaster? So build those relationships prior to a disaster, know their phone numbers, know how to contact them, and begin to build those relationships now, because when a disaster comes, they're going to be something that is necessary and something you're going to need. So when you build a plan and put a plan together, not only do the planning, you need to train your employees on what their expectations are, and then you need to exercise it at least once a year. Sit down with your plan, make sure everybody understands it, knows their job, and then run an exercise and make sure everybody knows what their responsibility is moving forward. Don't wait for a disaster to happen, because you'll have tunnel vision. Something will get left off. I can guarantee you that. If it's written down on paper, you have a checklist to be able to work off of. If it's just something you're going through in your head, you're going to miss something. So make sure that you do this prior to hurricane season is probably the best time to be able to do it. So right now is the time to be able to write a plan and begin to move forward with it. And then don't self-deploy. We have assets in the field. That's what we do. We're going to come out and we're going to work with Task Force One, work with water recovery and help those folks. If you self-deploy and you're out helping folks and you get into trouble, then we've got to pull resources away from what they're doing and help you out. So we ask you, don't self-deploy during a disaster. It has life altering and life losing effects, and we want to make sure everybody's safe. And we have professionals that are going to be able to do that. So we thank you for that. If you move to the next slide. I wanted to talk just a little bit about how to do business with TDM. We, in September of 2019, we were removed, taking out of the Department of Public Safety. We created our own agency, the Texas Division of Emergency Management, and we were placed under the stewardship of the Texas A&M University system. And this is a great thing for us because we work with the agencies that are under that umbrella. There are 8 agencies under the Texas A&M University system: TEACS, AgriLife, Texas Forest Service, all of these organizations that we have already relationships with when we are working at a disaster. And this gives us the capability of being able to cross disciplines instead of having to go through another system and asking permission to be able to do that. These are agencies that we work together. We're now a seamless group that we're able to do some things. Pandemic is an outstanding example of how all these agencies are working together. And because of that, the A&M system has a specific buying system that we have to utilize, which is called Aggie Buy. And so to be able to sell products to TDM, to Texas Forest Service, any of the 8 agencies that are under the A&M system and the university system, and all of the universities that are under the system, Aggie Buy is something that you're going to have to register with. So I recommend you go to this website. It'll walk you through that. The other area that we pull our vendors from is the comptroller, a vendor account, Texas Comptroller of Public Accounts, and we utilize their vendor purchasing system. So when we go to Aggie Buy and we can't find what we need, we'll go to the vendor system. They also do our bid process that we have to submit to. So when we go out for bids, the Texas Comptroller's office is who we work with. So not only would you be able to be a vendor for TDM, but every other state agency in the state of Texas also follows this procedure to be able to be a vendor for the state of Texas. So I highly recommend that you sign up for those two if you're looking to sell to TDM. We're a corporation, just like Dell, AT&T, all of those. We have to buy chairs and desks and computers and paper and pen. And so we are looking for vendors, and we go out to those two systems to be able to purchase. So that's really all I have. I want to thank everybody for the opportunity to speak. I do want to cover just a couple of more things. I'm sorry, I forgot. If you go to the next screen, I do want to say that presently we have developed pipelines for PPE for COVID. We have worked with Dell Computers in a private sector team through the Texas governor's PPE strike force and developed those pipelines. So we are pretty much covered when it comes to personal protective equipments, vaccines, testing for the state of Texas. But there are sometimes that we have to reach outside those pipelines. When we do, we go to Aggie Buy and we go to the comptroller's vendors list to be able to find vendors for that. If you'll move to the next slide. The last thing I want to tell you is think about where you're getting your information from. The internet is a wonderful thing. And sometimes my mother believes that everything that's on the internet is truth, but it's not. And so just be careful where you get your information and make sure it's a true and good source. When it comes to disaster, when it comes to emergency declarations, when it comes to events, emergency events happen in the state of Texas, TDM is a great resource to have. We have a LinkedIn page. We have a Facebook page. Please log on to those. We are also on Twitter under TDM, and then Chief Kidd. Nim Kidd is the Vice Chancellor of Disaster for the A&M system. He is also our chief of TDM. He is a great one to follow. I am on both Twitter and LinkedIn under Randy Vivian. Please feel free to follow me also. I give out mainly emergency management information. You might see my grandson every once in a while, but that's about it. But again, thank you for the opportunity to speak here. I want to thank Ashley and the Texas Sea Grant for allowing us to speak. I'll be around for questions at the end of this panel, but thank you, and everybody have a great day.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it. Next up, we have Joy Semien. She is a doctoral candidate at landscape architecture and urban planning, and she's a research assistant in the Hazard Reduction and Recovery Center.
Good afternoon. My name is Joy Semien. Today I will be speaking to you about lessons learned from businesses disrupted by hazardous events. Before I begin the presentation this afternoon, I wanted to spend a little time introducing myself and my research interests. Again, my name is Joy Semien. I received my Bachelor of Science in Biology and Chemistry from Dillard University in New Orleans, Louisiana, where I conducted research on topics like structural risk mitigation programs, increasing public health awareness in youth and young adults, and of course, understanding the impacts of anthropogenic sources on the environment. After leaving Dillard University in 2015, I enrolled in a master's program at Texas Southern University in urban planning and environmental policy. It was in this program where I served as a Barbara Jordan Mickey Leland Research Scholar, where I worked with a host of environmental justice scholars and advocates conducting research on building nonprofit organization capacity to respond to the needs of the broader community. Currently, I'm a doctoral candidate at Texas A&M University studying urban and regional sciences, where I'm conducting research on examining the multi-level impacts and recovery that Hurricane Harvey and now COVID-19 has had on organizations located in Southeast Texas. As a student, I have been fortunate to work in the Hazard Reduction and Recovery Center, conducting research under the current director, Dr. Michelle Meyer, who began her tenure in 2019. The center was initially established in 1988 at Texas A&M University. Researchers at the center focuses on hazard analysis, emergency preparedness, and response, disaster recovery, and hazard mitigation. Today, the topic of my presentation embodies lessons learned by businesses as a result of disruptions produced as a result of hazards. You see, businesses are central to communities. They provide local access to essential goods and services needed to sustain life and promote recovery. They also provide community members with employment opportunities, supporting the economic growth of local households. They can support the local economy by contributing to the tax base, which can support the development of key infrastructure. They can provide a space to increase cultural and social capital among community members and also increase community members' emotional stability. And during a disaster, or I should say rather after disaster, they can serve as an indicator for community recovery. Disasters can be detrimental to a business. Statistics from the SBA have shown that 25% of businesses fail within a year of being impacted by a disaster. 40% of businesses remain closed within a year of being impacted by a disaster. 60% of businesses remain open after disaster and experience revenue losses. Not to mention that businesses that are sole proprietors, racially minority-owned, female-owned, or home-based often have a harder time recovering post-disaster impacts. Given these statistics, it is important that research is continued to be conducted on businesses to fully understand the needs of the business. In an effort to understand the needs of the business post-hazard disruption, the Hazard Reduction Recovery Center, along with the National Institute of Science and Technology, the National Oceanic Atmospheric Association, and Texas Sea Grant, developed a research project to further explore business disruption. The team used the case study community of Beaumont in Port Arthur, Texas. This area was chosen because of its proximity to the coast and a susceptibility to hazards. Beaumont and Port Arthur is located in Jefferson County in Southeast Texas. Both cities are 2 parts out of 3 of the Golden Triangle with a combined land area of 151.7 square miles. The area was impacted by Hurricane Harvey, Tropical Storm Imelda, and COVID-19. Thousands of businesses were impacted, forcing both temporary and permanent closures, especially during Hurricane Harvey. The research assessed businesses and nonprofits as the unit of analysis. The sample size consisted of 500 organizations total, consisting of 300 businesses and 200 nonprofits. As a result of the continuous onset of disastrous events, the study used a mixed method survey approach that consisted of a telephone and in-person surveys and interviews. The survey topics included risk perception, mitigation behavior, finance and mitigation, and organizational recovery. The results from the pre-survey Harvey risk perception portion of the survey indicated that 37% believed that they would not be inundated with floodwaters, 44% believed that they would not be severely damaged or destroyed, 45% believed that they would not lose inventory or supplies, 40% believe that they would experience disruption to electrical, telephone, or other utility services. The asterisks on the slide indicate minority significance, so these values are significant in minority communities. Those racially minority, women-owned, veteran-owned. The results from the post-survey Harvey risk perception portion of the survey indicated that 47% are very concerned about the possibility of another hazard occurring. 38% are very concerned about losing their inventory and supplies in the event of another hazard impact. 58% are concerned about experiencing utility disruptions. 51% are very prepared or feel they're very prepared in the event of another hazard occurring. It's important to know how to access hazard-related resources and information, because 62% said they did. The results from the mitigation behavior prior to Hurricane Harvey indicated that businesses were more likely to back up all important documents, maintain off-site backups, receive disaster-related information, lift inventory and other supplies off the ground, make plans for a temporary location, and attend disaster preparedness meetings. These same participants were least likely to perform mitigation measures like elevate the height of the building, increase landscaping, floodproofing, dryproofing, and purchase increased insurance and board windows. This is problematic because the literature indicates those that take mitigation and preparedness measures before hurricanes are less likely to experience extensive damages, loss of supplies, and inventory. The results of the mitigation behavior post-Hurricane Harvey indicated that less than 50% of business owners had prepared an emergency response plan, continuity plan, and disaster recovery plan prior to Harvey, while those who had prepared a plan found the plans useful. We asked business owners about their flood insurance. Less than 35% had flood insurance for their building. 30% had insurance for their business interruption, and 35% had insurance for their content. Less than 36% were required to have flood insurance, either for their building, content, or business interruption. 27% filed a claim for their business interruption, 38% filed one for their building damages, and 35% filed one for their content damages. It is important to note here that it's imperative that as business owners to invest in flood insurance, even when it's not required. Be sure to select insurance that protects your building, your content, and business interruption. Keep records of all of your documents and keep them with you during a hazard event. We also asked business owners if they had applied for financial assistance. The largest amount of funding received came from fundraisers, SBA, FEMA, NGOs, and churches. Respondents did not indicate that they received local government funds or bridge loan programs. The remaining respondents indicated they had applied for state and federal funds and crowdsourcing online. We also asked business owners about the impact of disasters on the employees. 65% of respondents indicated that their employees had damage to their home, transportation problems, had to evacuate, had personal vehicle problems. 40% indicated that they had caregiving responsibilities. Very few businesses indicated knowledge that any of their employees experienced long-term health effects, mental health issues, physical health issues. 40% of business owners indicated that employees were given an alternative work location, and those employees had to spend extra time at work before, during, and after the disaster. Overall, 50% of businesses experience an increase in customers and 32% of businesses experience a decrease in customers. This is why it's important to have a plan and a business rainy day fund to support the overall operations in the event of a disaster. So what can you do before a disaster strikes? According to readybusiness.gov, produced by FEMA, they suggest that businesses know what to do before, during, and after a disaster. So building up their knowledge about disasters and about preparedness and mitigation measures. They should identify their risks, know what disasters are more likely to affect that business, develop a workplace emergency plan, and be sure employees know how to use it. Create a crisis communications plan to keep in contact with customers and suppliers and employees during and after a disaster. Test and practice your preparedness plans. Have emergency supplies available to employees. Insurance policies to ensure that you have coverage and listen to local officials. From our research indicates that in many cases, businesses do not know how to do these things. They don't know how to identify their risks. They don't know how to build knowledge prior to a disaster. They do not know how to identify their risks. They do not know how to develop a workplace emergency plan, and they don't know how to have employees practice that plan. They don't know how to create a crisis communication plan. They don't know how to test and practice additional preparedness plans, emergency plans, and continuity plans. And many of them don't have emergency supplies available at the workplace. Many of them did not check their insurance policies to ensure they had enough coverage. While almost everybody knows how to listen to local officials and local media that a storm is coming. It is extremely important that as a business owner, each entity takes the necessary steps to protect themselves, their clientele, and their employees by taking the proper mitigation and preparedness action. This will help ultimately to reduce the impact on the business. Thank you for listening to today's presentation, and I'm available for questions.
Thank you to all the presenters. Can you guys all now turn on your videos and we will enter into the question and answer session. Kate will be facilitating. Go ahead.
Howdy, everyone. I'm Kate DeGennaro. I'm a planning specialist with Texas Sea Grant. I'll be taking over for the Q&A period. Thank you, Walter, for running the technical side of our webinar and sharing all the presentations. Believe all of our panelists are in, all the videos are on. Few housekeeping tips. We have disabled the chat box, so if any attendees have any questions, please add them to the Q&A box, and I can read them aloud so all the attendees and all the panelists can hear them. We haven't received any questions in the Q&A box yet, but we have had a few come in through emails. So our first question that someone emailed is there insurance for ransomware?
Yeah, I'll take that. There should be from ransomware. I assume you're talking about I think what Randy mentioned with the attack, that type of coverage that is available. My thought would be that would probably be a cyber policy. So you would have to talk to an agent, call around to companies or whatever. At the department, we should have some information and resources available on our website that can talk about that. I don't have a preference, or I can't plug or endorse any company or agents, but a lot of folks and companies have had success with independent agents. I mentioned that in my presentation. I know personally I use one for my home and auto and all my needs, and then the independent agent can shop around and find coverage for you. But the ransomware, that should be covered under a cyber policy, and you can kind of take it from there.
Thank you, John. Does anybody else have anything to add to that? Okay, our next question is the Paycheck Protection Program going to be available for future disasters?
I guess I'll take that. At this point, the Paycheck Protection Program was only specified for the pandemic. Those are federal government enacted events. And so if that program were to be extended, it would have to come up, in my limited knowledge of how government works and the legislative process works. But that's going to have to be a legislative deal per event. So I don't see this can't be expanded outside of COVID. But if another huge event like this were to come up, I would say that it was a successful program. You would probably see it again.
Thank you, Randy. Did you get a couple of questions through email, Ashley?
Yeah, sure. There's a question. I know in the insurance, it can be a burden for some businesses to keep up with their insurance. Are there any programs, John, or that anyone knows about if they are having trouble affording their insurance, or especially after a disaster, if it goes up? Are there any programs to help people out with trying to get a handle of that?
Yeah, I'm not sure about any financial assistance that would be there. There are some cost saving measures that you can do to save on your premium. One would be what we talked about is the business owner's policy, where you lump all your coverage into one package. Companies typically give a discount if you insure multiple lines. Lines can be in insurance vernacular if you're not familiar with that. If you do a package or do your auto, different things like that, they'll give you a discount. I mentioned deductibles as well. That can be a little risky because especially when you're building, you might think I can raise my deductible from 1% to 5% or 1% to 2%, but you just have to do the math. If you're saving X in premium per month or per year and one loss occurs, how much more of a deductible will you pay? I've seen folks, I've heard stories that folks having success on the auto side doing that, going with a higher deductible for comprehensive coverage, not necessarily going with a $100 deductible, going 500 up or even to 1,000. I've seen prior to TDI, I handled auto claims for 14 years. I saw a handful of deductibles close to 2,000. So I think that saves you on some premium. So there's different ways you can save on insurance. Shop around, but I will caution, if you shop around, I mentioned, I'll say it again, you have to read your policy, because a lot of times lower cost means less coverage. So you have to see what's covered, and then you don't want to be reading your policy when you have a loss and then realize something's not covered or excluded. But I'm not aware of any financial assistance. I'll defer to others on the panel if they're aware of anything.
Yeah, if anyone comes up with something or can think of something that would be helpful. I have a question for Joy. So you've done this study. Are there any future plans you have for doing other studies, or are you continuing on with this? What's next steps for you over there?
Yeah, so we've actually gotten 2 more grants to expand the locations in where we were originally. So originally we were in Beaumont and Port Arthur. Now we ventured into Lake Charles. We're expanding into Orange and I think a few other places in Southeast Texas. So the project is actually growing. Our end goal is to obviously develop an annual handbook that we can give to businesses that both have participated and just are in that region, and then also to develop a training program.
That's great. I was going to actually ask like what you're going to develop, but so once you guys do develop it, do you have a plan yet for how you might get that around to people or disperse it?
Of course, we're going to use you guys.
Yeah, we're going to use these networks. No, that's a good plan. No, thank you. And I have a question for Randy. You talked about disasters or after a disaster, maybe not enough damage was assessed or something, and people didn't get the federal funds that they were hoping to get. Is there anything business, like if businesses feel like there's a lot of damage and they need to report on that, like who do they go to kind of report out on damages to try and get that higher threshold?
After every disaster, we send out a disaster survey, and it's open to businesses, and they would just go to the TDEM website, and that is www.tdem.texas.gov, and that is the tool that we utilize to be able to get that total number for the federal government to be able to turn on that spigot. And I will tell you, it is not utilized sufficiently enough in every disaster. We obviously are limited on how we can advertise that, but I mean, if a disaster happens, that tool is going to be available, but it's also going to be in the paper, it's going to be on the news, it's going to be everywhere that we can get that out. For people to understand that they need to do that, but to fill that out and then get it back to us so we can submit it to FEMA is pretty crucial. And so we will do everything within our power to get everybody aware that it needs to be done. But that is the primary tool that we're going to use to be able to do that.
That's great. And I guess we could help, and everyone could help on their end to maybe send to their networks and kind
Absolutely.
of businesses to that's
And we work through chambers of commerce, we work through local business organizations, economic development groups, everybody that we can to get that out, because I will tell you, if everybody could fill one out and bring it in, that would make our job a lot easier.
Okay. Thank you.
Appreciate
that.
I think Katie might have mentioned the Small Business Association and some services that they could provide. Does anybody have any information about the EDA, U.S. Economic Development Association? Because I believe they have disaster funds as well. I'm not an expert on that.
I'm not either. I couldn't tell you.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure about that, but I would assume that they probably fall under the same funding as SBA. So I mean, I can't say for certain, but that's my thought.
Thank you.
Yeah. And Katie, I appreciate your presentation. I was trying to think, you had some really great points of prepping, everyone did, and I really appreciate it, of prepping before. Is there some role or something that the Better Business Bureau fills like immediately after a disaster, working with businesses?
The way that our role kind of works in this aspect is that we provide like consultative services, assistance in that way. So we can't provide the actual, like I can't, we don't have our own funding or anything like that. But what we can do is give you that give you that support and kind of point you in the direction of these other organizations. And so that's kind of my job, is to kind of stay abreast of all of the funding opportunities and emergency funding and things like that, and to make, so that I can be prepared in case something like this happens. And then we can point them in the right direction. So that's really the role that we would serve.
That's excellent. I mean, with so much capacity and damage after a disaster, I'm sure as many organizations that can help with that is helpful. I did get something in the chat that asked, I think John had mentioned, make sure, like, if you own your building, or check on, see who's owns it and if they have insurance. If your landlord doesn't have insurance, or you find that they're not covered to a certain, is there anything that a business owner can do or encourage them to try and get more coverage or to get covered?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm not aware of any law that would force the landlord to have insurance. As I mentioned in the presentation, there are laws in the book in the transportation code that talk about financial responsibility when you're driving a car, when you're at fault. There's state minimum requirements you have to satisfy, but I'm unaware of any requirement that forces a business owner to have homeowners insurance. The mortgage company may require it as a part of it, but if a landlord outright owns the building, I'm not aware of any requirement. And then it would just be up to the person. If you ask who your insurance is with, you might want to, that would be a personal choice. Then you may want to go look for a different landlord. You can shop around and see if there's some potential where you can cover obviously you'll need insurance for the items you own that are inside that building, even if the landlord has insurance. But you need to ask yourself, do I want to put myself in a position if a disaster strikes and this building is closed for 3 months or longer, or may never open up again, and I need to have a business either to greet customers or produce my product, whatever it is, and then you're left scrambling to go find something after a disaster, that might not suit well for your business model. So you might want to look at getting a different landlord at that point.
That's good advice, or having a conversation at the very least. I did think of one for Joy. So you're continuing your study and stuff. Were there questions, like after you wrote your report up and kind of compiled information from your previous studies, were there questions or like topics that you realized you didn't ask or were important to ask that you're going to ask in the future?
One of the questions that we did not include on the survey, now I did ask it once I realized it, but it was like, what do you want, or what do you exactly need? A lot of times, like our surveys, we assess, where's your impact? We assess insurance and all those levels. We get all those category data, but we never actually ask, okay, what do you actually need? What do you want from me, right? And I think one of the things that we did when we were developing or trying to develop the handbook is that we're trying to compile all this data, but we never at one point said, specifically, what do you need? What would you like to see? What would you have done differently? So those are 3 questions that we definitely added to the new survey, because I found like a lot of times when you just ask people what they need, they'll tell you.
That's a good point. I look forward to that. I think that's all the questions I had on my end. I don't know if anyone in the attendees or chat or anything have any more questions. If not, we can let you go, and we will certainly, everyone who registered will send you an email afterwards with all this information and everyone's contact information. Please reach out to our great presenters. Thank you so much for joining us. They have a lot of information that can help you in the things you need, and we'll share the recording. So please share that with your networks and people you think who might be interested.
And after the webinar ends, a post survey is going to be sent to all the attendees. And this is just to gather information about how the webinar went. If you guys have any suggestions for how it can be improved, it's just, so we can do a better job with every approaching webinar. So we'd appreciate if you guys could fill out the survey.
Yes. Thank you everyone for joining. Thank you panelists for joining us as well.
Thank you, everybody. Please look forward to our future webinars. And here is a bigger image of all the contact information. If you have specific questions, please make sure to reach out to the panelist or please check out our websites. Thank you so much, and I hope to see you in our future webinars. Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Bye.